Chapter 257. It was a flash of light, ephemeral yet consequential. In the brief yet profound silence, the logs gathered by Yudhar's power shattered into fragments. The monster that had been standing still behind them also split into two with a strange sound, sliding apart. Black bodily fluids gushed out, soaking the ground, and the dense forest that had been thriving let out a mournful cry. Then more trees than those broken by the emerging monster began to tremble and fell with a thud, one after another. Ah! Only then did the mages, who had barely regained their senses, scream. Yudhir, without even thinking to dodge the fragments of branches brushing his cheek, watched this overwhelming spectacle. Unlike when the monster appeared, everything was falling in the opposite direction from where the people were standing, so there was no fear for them to getting hurt. It took a while for the falling trees to finally stop and the dust to settle. Yudhir felt a bright light hitting his face after the last tree had fallen, and he raised his hand to shield his eyes and looked up. The sun? The forest had been so dense that no light could penetrate it, but now a large clearing had formed in a semicircle around where the monster had stood, and the blocked sunlight was pouring into the area. Everyone was speechless at the sight, too surreal to be the result of a single action. Yudhir turned his head in the neatly cut clearing, large enough to build several houses, and looked towards Kishir. He was still tightly gripping the handle of the siege sword, quietly observing the spectacle he had created. Yudhir felt a tingling sensation throughout his body for the first time. Even though he was not the one who had achieved this result, he wondered how Kishir, who had released the power he had been suppressing all this time, must have felt. He felt a strange regret that he couldn't see the emotions reflected in the red eyes hidden under the hat. "Are you okay?" When he finally asked, Kishir moved his head a little towards Yudhir. The corner of his lips, which had been closed indefinitely, slowly rose. "It's refreshing now that the sun is out." He had thought that he would naturally adjust and swing the sword, but he was worried that he might have exerted too much power because the result was too tremendous. It was a relief that he seemed okay. What was that?" While the two were looking at each other, the others who had been behind them rushed over and surrounded them. The cavalry members looked at them with faces full of surprise and admiration. Prince Ajane with a stern expression, and the mages with faces stained with shock and fear, not knowing what to do, looking up at Kishir. "Is that also the power of an awakener? Or perhaps sword?" Facing the mages who couldn't dare to utter the word Sword Master, the title held by only a few on the continent, Kishir smiled. "I am a cavalry member." Does he mean he used a sword but he won't reveal his identity yet? While the cavalry members who had noticed the somewhat ambiguous meaning of the answer were secretly exchanging glances, the mages seemed to take his words at face value and finally showed a look of relief. "Ah, right. I have heard that among the awakeners there were those who possess power that appears like the aura of a sword master." "Right. There was a rumor about 2 years ago, wasn't there? A 10-year-old kid split a rock with a tree's branch." "That's right. I remember that. I thought it was an exaggerated rumor at the time, but seeing today, it might not have been." A smile slowly spread across the faces of the cavalry members. It was a smile that could only be seen because they knew that the 10-year-old kid from back then was also in the cavalry. Yudhir also thought of Jimmy, who would be training hard in the capital around this time. Jimmy is talented and strong, of of course, but he probably couldn't have achieved this result with a single move. There were a few more members who exhibited abilities similar to Aura, including Jimmy. However, their inherent SWAT skills were not yet so impressive. So, when they sparred using only pure swordsmanship without using their abilities, they would lose to Uther. But the perfect sword draw that Kishir had just executed. After joining the cavalry, he had hardly seen Kishir swing a sword, let alone touch one. Unlike divine power or magic, which can be maintained without use, swordsmanship dulls if not practiced. This was true for anyone, but the movement of Kishir he had just seen was so brilliant and beautiful that it seemed to break such common sense. Yudhir recalled a memory of when Kishir's hand had touched him, and he had fleeting thought that it was the hand of a swordsman, which seemed to have done nothing harsh but was actually very firm. What kind of effort had he made in unseen places to maintain that hand so that he could use it properly when a day like this came? A chill ran down his neck again. Hey, the strange crack from earlier had disappeared. One of the mages, who was awkwardly putting away the magic tool he had drawn to attack the monster, suddenly shouted in surprise. Following his outcry, they all turned their heads and realized that the crack had been floating near the monster had indeed disappeared. That's true. What happened? We don't need to fight anymore. Let's go while we have a chance. Either? What was there? We were in the back and couldn't see anything. Yudhir briefly explained the crack to Gakane, who asked cautiously, Do you know about the crack that appears before a monster emerges? I have heard of it, but I haven't seen it myself yet. Something similar was in front of us. Ah, so that's where those monsters came from. Gakane's gaze turned towards Kishir, who had slaughtered the monster in one fell swoop. He seemed curious about the power Kishir had shown, but he soon turned his gaze away, as it seemed inappropriate to speak in the presence of a Jain and the mages. No, it has nothing to do with that. It was there before we arrived. The mages were discussing whether to ignore it or turn around. Can that happen? It didn't feel good just looking at it. It's gone now, so we will have to check it out later. The sense of how strange it was seemed to vaguely drawn on them, and the expressions of the members who were listening to Yudhir's words hardened a little. We will now quicken our pace and get out of here before more monsters appear. Hurry up and follow. They hurriedly followed the mages, who were moving ahead, avoiding the corpse of the monster. The party members, who had been retching due to the shock of the event, quietly followed with their faces lost in thought. Yudhir, sticking close behind Kishir, sneakily glanced at the tip of the sheath of the divine sword wrapped in his cloak. The sheath, which looked too far from practical use due to its excessive splendor, was covered in cloth to hide it from the eyes of others. But the divine sword was still a divine sword. He felt a more vivid presence from the sword, which had come out of the sheath for the first time in this life after Kishir became its owner. Are you looking at the energy of the sword? Ah, yes. At Kishir's question, he felt caught and answered in a small voice, and a low laugh flowed from between the hat and the cloth. Yudhir kept silent for a moment before bringing up the topic of the sword. It seems that no one has figured out what it is. To the eye, it's just a needlessly flashy, ceremonial sword. Kishir jokingly replied in a small voice, as if sharing a secret between the two of them. Do you plan to continue using that? If possible, I plan to do so. But I and this guy need a period of adaptation. Since the control was not as good as expected, I will have to adjust it for a while and take the lead often. You will have to explain to the other members. Yes, that will be necessary. Saying so, Kishir lightly touched the hilt of the sword hanging at his waist. By the way, it's been a long time since this guy's energy has spread out vividly enough to be seen. It seems too excited for the first time, so I need to calm it down. You talk as if it's alive. He threw the answer without thinking, but when Kishir's reply was slower than usual, a strange feeling came over him. Turning his head, Yidhir met the red lips that were smiling with a slightly different color than before. A chill ran down his fingertips. You're joking, right? Strictly speaking, it doesn't talk or move. In that sense, it's not alive. Then what is? Ah, another monster! Before he could ask what the meaning of that smile was, another scream erupted from the front. With a short laugh at Yidhir's scowling face, Kishir leisurely stepped forward again. From now on, it seems that many monsters will appear, so protect yourself and the weak and fight accordingly. Don't be ashamed to rely on your comrades. I will also move as a member of the party, so as I said before, I leave the overall command to the leaders. His gaze fell on Khana and Yidhir and then fell away. As Kishir, who had lightly drawn his sword, moved forward, noise came from another direction, as if monsters were appearing. Most of them seemed to be the type of the monsters they had just killed, but occasionally different ones were seen. I'm finally going to fight a real monster. What should I do? I'm not good at it yet. Don't be afraid, Eamon. Your power is darkness. First, bring the mages and protect them. You seem excessively frightened. It's not good to leave you there. Gakane, I'll need your help too. Understood. What should I do? Your Highness, firstly, take a sword and guard the surroundings. Khana, tightly grabbing the trembling wrist of Eamon, issued commands without hesitation to him, Gakane, and even Prince Ajane. Yidhir followed the elder siblings, who were rushing forward with excited faces, with long strides, quietly catching his breath. Finn. Huh? I know you're excited, but what's needed right now comes first. Help Gakane and Eamon move all the mages to the back, and then join the fight. This is a good opportunity to improve your teleportation ability. But I want to fight more right now. You can't always do what you want. If you move quickly, even after you have moved all the mages to the back, there will be still monsters left. Okay, got it. Though they were a bit disheartened, the elder siblings moved quickly as they always did. Working together seamlessly, Yidhir slipped between their gaps and stood behind Kishir, who was facing the monsters that screamed so loud. It felt as if the surrounding forest would shake.